Okay, good morning. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order for the Temecula City Council Budget Workshop here on May 19th. Can we go ahead and start with the flag salute, please? All right, hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, can we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Alexander?
I'm here.
Councilmember Edwards? Here. Mayor Ron?
Here.
Councilmember Schwank?
Here.
And Councilmember Stewart is absent.
All right, do we have any public comments on non-agenda items?
We do not.
All right, moving on then. We are going to hold our joint meeting of City Council, Temecula Community Service District, and successor agency to the redevelopment agency. And we have one item on the calendar this morning for business. It's the review of fiscal years 23-27 capital improvement plan and the review of fiscal year 22-23 CIP, annual operating budgets for the City of Temecula, City of Temecula's Community Services District, and the successor agency, Temecula Redevelopment Agency. And I think I can just go ahead and turn this over to our city manager this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, am I on there? Okay. Well, good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm pleased to share again this year that the city's operating budget is balanced, the community service budget is balanced, the capital improvement program is robust and well-funded. As shared in February, when we provided the mid-year financial update, the city fared better than anticipated through the pandemic, and our local economy has rebounded and remains strong. Today, our executive staff, representing the exceptional efforts of their respective departments, will walk you through the budget process and provide the highlights of the annual operating and capital improvement program budgets. Director of Finance Jennifer Hennessy, as our Chief Financial Officer, will summarize the proposed operating budgets for the General Fund and Measure S Fund. Captain Zach Hall will present the police budget and highlight the department's special teams. Fire Battalion Chief Scott Slump, who is sitting in for Chief Crater, will present the fire department budget. And Director of Community Services Erica Russo will discuss the TCSD budget highlights, programs, and events. Senior Human Resources Analyst Nicole Collins, who is sitting in for Director of Human Resources Isaac Garibay, will provide an update on city staffing levels. Director of Public Works Pat Thomas will discuss the capital improvement program budget. Deputy City Manager Luke Watson will provide an update on the city's affordable housing projects. And finally, Director Hennessy will provide a summary of the proposed changes to the city's budget policies. As with previous budget presentations, we would like to suggest that we run through all of the program and slides in their entirety, then pause on the back end for discussion and question and answers. We believe many questions may be answered or clarified when the whole budget picture is explained surrounding the AOB, CIP, the TCSD, and the 5-year forecast. As you will see through today's presentation, the city's financial position remains healthy, with all funds balanced and all reserves fully funded. The budget process begins each year in January with the review of the current year's budget and the development of revenue projections and the preliminary 5-year forecast, which serves as the baseline budget for the ensuing fiscal year. In early February, staff presented the budget priorities and key fiscal policies to the City Council for discussion and potential changes for the upcoming budget. Council's confirmation of the priorities served as the foundation upon which staff developed the proposed budget. Additionally, staff held budget engagement sessions with each of the city's 5 boards and commissions during February and March to obtain feedback on community priorities. The board commission members' feedback has been incorporated in the budget recommendations, and we have a separate slide coming up that summarizes their feedback. During the month of April, departments present their requests via several internal review meetings, which culminate in the development of the proposed budget and capital improvement program being presented today. Any changes to the proposed budget and CIP that come from our discussions today will be incorporated into the final operating and capital budgets that will be presented to the City Council at the June 14th meeting. From the budget engagement sessions with the board and commission, several themes emerged from the discussions, including the board and commission members overwhelmingly agree that the city's investment in resources are in line with the community's priorities. Public safety should remain the city's top priority. A continued investment to address traffic congestion and affordable housing options is highly valued. Having ongoing community engagement is a hallmark for the city and should continue into the future. You will see that we've taken these comments to heart and have incorporated them throughout the budget and the CIP, from the proactive approach to policing that you will hear from Captain Hall to the wide-ranging investment in infrastructure projects that Pat Thomas will share when presenting the CIP. The city remains safety-focused and centered on providing a high quality of life to its residents. Projects and programs proposed in the city's annual operating budget and capital improvement program must be consistent with the city's core values identified in the Quality of Life Master Plan. Performance indicators are measured annually to track progress and the completion of goals and objectives. On April 27, 2021, the City Council established a Blue Ribbon Committee to update the Quality of Life Master Plan. The QLMP identifies the city's 6 core values, including healthy and livable city, economic prosperity, a safe and prepared community, sustainable city, transportation mobility and connectivity, and accountable and responsive city government. The update will include a 7th core value of equity. The QLMP update is nearing completion after several Blue Ribbon Committee meetings, surveys, pop-up events, workshops, and other public outreach events. The last BRC meeting is scheduled for July 21st, 2022, and the QLMP is set to go before the City Council in the fall. The Long Range Planning Division has developed a 4-phase multi-year process to update the general plan. Phase 1 is complete and included updates to housing and public safety elements. Phase 2 is in process and includes an update to the QLMP, a baseline analysis of the city's circulation element, and developing a complete streets policy document. Phase 3 will include a fiscal land use study to analyze the city's remaining development capacity and market absorption potential for residential, commercial, and industrial development. The final phase is to work with the General Plan Advisory Committee to update to the general plan and EIR over an 18-month timeframe. Director of Finance Jennifer Hennessy will now review the fiscal impacts of the proposed general fund and Measure S budgets. Jen?
Thanks, Aaron. Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. The general fund serves as the city's primary operating fund and provides funding required to deliver public safety, public works, community development, and administrative services to the city. The general fund revenue is projected to reach $103.5 million as the economy continues to rebound and expand. Expenditures are projected to be $92 million next fiscal year. The general fund also contributes to other funds as noted here. Contributions to the CIP are primarily for the general plan update and sidewalks at DLR Drive. Annual payments for debt service on the Civic Center and MRC facilities are included, and the general fund will contribute $1.5 million into the Fire Facility Acquisition Fund to build up a reserve for the potential acquisition of Fire Station Number 12 in Old Town. With the offsetting savings achieved through the receipt of federal grants, the general fund is transferring a total of $14 million over 2 years to establish the Community Reinvestment Program Fund, which the council approved earlier this year. General fund revenue is projected to increase by 3.2% to $103.5 million, mostly attributable to the rebound in sales tax, property tax, transient occupancy tax, or TOT, and gas tax. Sales tax, property tax, and Measure S are forecasted in conjunction with the city's consultant, HDL Companies, whose team is dedicated to analyzing transaction-level detail and statewide economic trends. Projections in these categories show solid growth as the economy expands, with several new establishments opening up in the city. The TOT revenue forecast was prepared in conjunction with Visit Temecula Valley and is projected to increase by 3% to nearly $3.9 million, with the recent opening of 2 new hotels and another 2 in various stages of the planning process. And Measure S revenue reflects the funding for 11 police officers, staffing for Fire Station 95, and future asset replacement. Transfers in reflect monies from the gas tax fund, supplemental law enforcement grant, and the final payback of the advance made in 2017 for the remodel of Fire Station 73. Total general fund expenditures are projected to increase by 10.6% to $91.9 million, of which 57% is dedicated to public safety. Public Works makes up 20% of the general fund and is expected to increase 11.2%, due primarily to negotiated compensation adjustments and the administration of the larger CIP program. City administration makes up 13% and is expected to increase 6.7% due to new staffing and compensation adjustments. And community development makes up 9% of the general fund and is expected to increase by 17.3% due to several new positions in code enforcement, building and safety, and planning. I'll now turn the presentation over to Captain Zach Hall, who will present the police department budget.
Good morning. The police department budget of $41 million reflects a 8.9% increase over the prior year. The budget includes an estimated 2.5% increase in the sheriff's contract rate, plus the addition of 5 new sworn officers and 1 new community service officer. The annual motorcycle replacement program includes 2 new motorcycles this year. Staffing levels are requested to increase to 118.9 sworn officers and 18 community services officers. The city contracts with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department to provide patrol coverage and dedicated sworn positions which serve as command officers and on various special teams, including the recently created Old Town Metro team, which has made a significant impact in reducing crime and increasing the safety in Old Town. The fiscal year 2022-2023 budget includes the request for an additional 5 hours per day of patrol coverage, 2 sheriff sergeant positions to oversee Metro, a special enforcement team, and 1 additional community services officer to support Metro. With the recent retirement of K-9 Boris, this position will be eliminated from the contract as the sheriff's office will provide future K-9 support through an allocation. These new positions, plus the 3 deputies added at mid-year, will bring the total number of sworn deputies to 118.9, exceeding the targeted staffing ratio of 1 officer per 1,000 residents. As mentioned earlier, the introduction of the Old Town Metro team has had a significant impact on increasing public safety. This team consists of 10 deputies and provides over 20,000 hours of dedicated law enforcement service per year in Old Town. Looking to the future, a dedicated quality of life-oriented team is being created with a focus on supporting homeless outreach, security escort for city staff on service calls and inspections, neighborhood watch, massage parlor compliance checks, community education, and more. I will now turn the presentation over to Battalion Chief Scott Slump to present the fire budget.
Good morning. The fire department budget for next year is projected to be $11.2 million. The total contract with Riverside County is $19.7 million. However, the structural fire tax credit collected through the residents' property tax bills offsets the contract by $10.3 million. The budget includes the purchase of 2 new medic squads that will be utilized by firefighters for emergency response. They will replace 2 old medic squad vehicles at Fire Station 84 and Fire Station 92. Staffing will remain at 4 firefighters per fire engine and ladder truck with a total of 71 fire personnel. This will continue to meet the Cal OSHA requirement of 2 in, 2 out for firefighter safety during a structure fire. The city received a $378,000 fire prevention grant from Cal Fire. These funds will be used to develop a wildfire protection plan for Temecula Creek. The city will also facilitate wildland-urban interface fire prevention training within the community to ensure residents are educated on how best to protect their homes. I'll now turn it back over to Jennifer to finish up the general fund section of the presentation.
Thank you. In addition to the safety departments, the general fund also includes the Public Works, Community Development, and Administration departments, which has a combined budget of $38.3 million. The addition of several new positions, combined with the negotiated compensation adjustments for staff, make up the requested 10.9% increase in the non-safety operating budget. The ending fund balance for general fund is projected to be $48.5 million next fiscal year. Reserves are fully funded, and after deducting for future commitments, the available fund balance is projected to be $24.6 million. This slide illustrates the different components of the $48.5 million fund balance. Per budget policy, 20% of operating expenditures are set aside into the reserve for economic uncertainty, and an additional 5% of operating expenditures are set aside into the secondary reserve. These funds are utilized in the event of a major disaster, significant loss in revenue, or for large unexpected expenditures. Reserves are projected to exceed $22 million next fiscal year. A portion of the fund balance is assigned or committed to future costs associated with capital projects previously approved in the 5-year CIP and the Pechanga-funded officer as those funds are paid in advance. Unassigned fund balance of $24.6 million is the amount available for future one-time appropriations. The city has a longstanding practice of not only budgeting for the next fiscal year, but for the next 5 fiscal years. This long-term approach to financial management has served us well, as we're able to forecast the long-term fiscal impacts of operational decisions made in the present. This slide illustrates the strong fiscal position of the city's general fund, which is structurally balanced with revenues exceeding expenditures. Both revenues and expenditures reflect realistic growth projections and include any known and anticipated contractual obligations, as well as an economic contraction predicted to begin in 23-24, as indicated by the dip in the black revenue trend line on this chart. This slide further illustrates the fiscal health of the general fund by showing that fund balance remains solvent and reserves are meeting the desired levels over the next 5 years. Measure S is the 1 cent transactions and use tax approved by the Temecula voters in November of 2016. This revenue source became effective in April of 2017 and has generated nearly $123 million over the last 5 years. Fiscal year 22-23 Measure S revenue is expected to exceed $37 million with a projected 4% growth rate over the current year. Total appropriations of $38 million are in line with Council's policy guidelines, prioritizing public safety, asset management, capital projects, and general services. Public safety funding of $6.6 million is recommended to augment the police and fire department operating budgets by providing funding for 11 police officers, Fire Station 95 staffing, and the future replacement of the fire ladder truck and inspection vehicles. Asset management funding of $3.6 million includes the deposit of $2 million into the street maintenance fund and $500,000 each into the fleet and technology replacement funds and $660,000 into the facilities replacement fund. Capital project investments total just under $15 million for fiscal year 22-23, with nearly $4 million committed to the CRC renovation project and $1.8 million for the Margarita Recreation Center project currently underway. And general and community services funding totaling $12.8 million, which is primarily dedicated to TCSD operations and library funding. A 5-year forecast is also prepared for the Measure S fund, as shown here. Revenue is projected to grow 4% in 22-23, then taper off to 2% growth in the next year, and then flat during 24-25 to reflect an economic contraction. Annual projections gradually shift from funding CIP projects towards funding higher levels of public safety and general services over time. The ending fund balance in each year is at a healthy level and available for any unforeseen one-time projects or programs. I'd like to now turn the presentation over to Director of Community Services, Erica Russo, who will walk you through the TCSD operations budget.
Good morning. The mission of TCSD is to improve the quality of life for our residents through a complement of facilities, programs, services, events, and activities, or as we like to say, creating community through people, parks, and programs. TCSD serves the community by providing essential access to resources that support the physical and mental health and wellness of people of all ages. This broad umbrella of community services is Parks and Rec and so much more, including inclusive senior and youth services, workforce and education development, responsible compassion, homeless outreach, sports, aquatics, and recreation classes and activities, special events, cultural arts, community engagement, and award-winning parks and facilities. The city's long-term commitment to mitigating the impacts of homelessness on individuals, businesses, and the community as a whole is known throughout the region as the very successful Responsible Compassion Program. Through collaborations with partners such as Social Work Action Group, Community Mission of Hope, Riverside Sheriff's Office, and neighboring agencies, city staff and multiple departments have been able to create a framework of support and accountability, which has helped 28 individuals exit the streets so far this year. Since the renewal of the contract with SWAG in January 2021, we have achieved an extraordinary 113 street exits, representing a net reduction of approximately 56% in the chronically homeless population. One of the surest and most exciting signs of return to a post-COVID normal is the return of our special events. In the past fiscal year, we were able to host not one but 2 Rod Runs, Santa's Electric Light Parade, Chilled in the Park, and the New Year's Eve Grape Drop, which was highlighted by CNN in a piece on quirky New Year's Eve celebrations around the country. The community will soon be enjoying the return of the 4th of July Parade and Extravaganza, the Build Your Own Boat Regatta, Color Run, and the Halloween Bike Tour. And thanks to the city's robust capital improvement program, it seems like every month there's a ribbon cutting on a different new amenity, from pump tracks to pickleball courts to new parks like Somers Bend. While we're talking about events, please mark your calendars for the Memorial Day observance on Saturday, May 28th at 6:30 p.m. right out in front of City Hall, which will feature Inland Valley Symphony as we honor those who have given their lives in service to our country. On a daily basis, perhaps the biggest way we impact the community's well-being is through our Classes and Activities program, one of the most extensive in the state. In a year in which nearly all of our regular offerings were negatively impacted by COVID, and after a year in which nearly all of our regular offerings were negatively impacted by COVID, and indoor classes entirely shut down for months, we are thrilled to release the Summer-Fall 2022 Activities Brochure, which features 52 pages of programming for the entire community and should be arriving in mailboxes this week. This past Monday was the first day of registration, and even without those brochures being in people's hands, it actually set a record for first-day registrations since we've been doing this program. Each year, we offer thousands of individual classes for every interest, including sports, performing and visual arts, crafts and cooking, and our nationally recognized aquatics program, which promotes physical activity and water safety for individuals of all ages and abilities. As you know, the new and improved MRC is currently under construction, and the CRC will be going under renovation this fall, so please be prepared for some of your favorite classes and activities to be relocated during this time. The tiny Harveston Community Park Room is doing triple duty during this time, and you will notice that it has been included in the CIP for proposed renovation and expansion to accommodate our ever-growing contract classes program. One of the most popular destinations is our library, the busiest in the Riverside County Library System, and this guide highlights 2 full pages of library programs and activities to promote literacy, academic achievement, and social engagement. TCSD's cultural arts divisions foster a vibrant and engaged community through the visual and performing arts, historic preservation, and cultural enrichment. Visitors to Old Town can learn about Temecula's rich history at Temecula Valley Museum, enjoy an alfresco art exhibit at First Friday Art Off the Walls, explore other cultures in our Second Saturdays programs at Sam Hicks Memorial Park, and have fun with scientific discovery at Penny Pickles Children's Museum, and take in live performances at the theater in the Merc. These many options provide a diversity of artistic expression and add color and texture to our community. In TCSD, we truly strive to meet the aspiration of offering something for everyone of every age and ability. At the heart of this goal is our Human Services team, which offers senior and inclusive services, as well as youth programming and workforce and education development. Our senior programs provide vital services including transportation, meals, support with life tasks such as taxes and filing for utility waivers, and respite from the heat or cold, as well as essential social connection. Please note that the Mary Phillips Senior Center will also be receiving a renovation this year. So beginning this summer, our normal programming will be relocating to the Temecula Community Center on Pujol Street. Our special needs programs have become known throughout the region for the innovative ways they promote social skills and interaction, job training, and support for individuals with development and other disabilities and their families. Our Workforce and Educational Development Division provides concrete workforce readiness and educational training in fields as diverse as healthcare, law, construction, STEM, hospitality, and more. These programs also benefit the community as a whole by providing a capable workforce ready to help drive economic growth. For next fiscal year, the TCSD budget assumes revenue totaling $16.6 million. Program revenue, which reflects the income from contract classes, registration fees, day camp, aquatics, and theater tickets, will grow by 2.3% as these programs return to pre-pandemic levels. Measure C, which is the $74.44 parcel tax dedicated to park programs and maintenance, is expected to increase by 1%. Measure S provides the remaining revenue necessary to cover the operations to facilitate TCSD's wide-ranging programs and services. Measure S revenue will total $11.8 million in fiscal year 22-23. Finally, a $1 million contribution from the newly adopted COVID-19 Pandemic Community Reinvestment Program will fund homeless services provided by TCSD and Public Works. Operating expenditures are increasing by 14.6% across 15 separate divisions, primarily due to the return of pre-pandemic levels, additional staffing, and the negotiated compensation adjustments. As shown in the TCSD 5-year forecast, revenue and expenditure levels are anticipated to grow between 3 and 6% per year as the district continues to enhance its services and programs offered to the public. I will now turn the presentation over to Senior Human Resources Analyst Nicole Collins to discuss citywide staffing.
Good morning. As part of the budget adoption in June, 3 separate resolutions will be included in the budget adoption, which would approve a negotiated 4-year Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between the City of Temecula and Teamsters Local 911, effective July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2026, an amended and restated management compensation plan, and an amended and restated City Council compensation plan, all of which will increase the HealthFlex contribution mandated by the Affordable Care Act from $400 to $600 per month per employee. This allowance can only be used for medical, dental, or vision insurance premiums, or be directed toward a healthcare flexible spending account, and any amount not utilized for these purposes is forfeited. Additionally, a separate resolution approving the schedule of authorized positions and salary schedule will be included in the operating budget agenda item. The salary schedule implements a compensation study, which was committed to as part of the previously mentioned labor agreement with Teamsters Local 911, but effectuates market adjustments to salaries in executive, mid-management, confidential, represented, and non-represented employees' base salaries effective July 1st, 2022. I will provide a brief summary of the citywide staffing levels for the next fiscal year. Total authorized positions for fiscal year 22-23 is increasing to a total of 196.45 full-time equivalent positions, which include the 5 council members. Since this time last year, 17.75 newly authorized positions have been requested, with 10.25 approved during the mid-year budget update in February. In addition to the full-time authorized staffing, the city employs a significant number of part-time, non-benefited project employees, primarily to assist with the programs offered by TCSD. For fiscal year 22-23, an estimated 58.7 full-time equivalent positions are requested in the operating budget. Staffing for the police and fire departments are provided through the contracts with Riverside County and CAL FIRE. Police staffing is projected to increase to 118.9 sworn officers and 18 community service officers. Fire staffing will also remain consistent with 71 fire personnel and will continue to provide 4 fire personnel per fire engine and ladder truck. This chart shows the city's authorized staffing levels since 1999. At the city's peak, a total of 210.75 positions were authorized. We remain 14.3 positions below that peak, with 196.45 total authorized positions. I will now turn the presentation over to Director of Public Works, Pat Thomas, to walk you through the Capital Improvement Program budget.
Thank you, Nicole, and good morning, Mayor and council members. The Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, is a comprehensive 5-year plan that addresses the capital needs of the city. Capital projects are those that cost over $30,000, have long-term lifespans, and are generally non-recurring. The fiscal years 2023 through 27 CIP is the largest in the city's history, with over $790 million in total costs. The city has identified funding sources totaling $590 million, or 74% of the total CIP. The remaining $204 million is unspecified at this time. However, before construction begins on any of these projects, a funding source will be identified. Between the current year and next fiscal year, it's anticipated that CIP spending is programmed to exceed $279 million. The CIP includes a total of 105 separate projects segregated by project category, and we'll cover those in just a moment. This slide illustrates the significant efforts of the city to leverage outside sources of funds, which has yielded tremendous results in recent years. City funding contributes roughly 30% of the total CIP funding, with outside sources such as federal grants, state grants, Riverside County's Transportation Uniform Mitigation Fees, or TUMF, and Measure A, as well as other specific funding sources, make up the remaining 70% of the CIP. The CIP includes the addition of 9 new projects this year. An auto mall wayfinding sign program is added for this year. The Bike Lane and Trails program includes a new project to begin plans for approximately 2.5 miles of multi-use trails in the vacant hillside above the Ronald Reagan Sports Park. The Butterfield Stage Road storm drain improvements include the addition of a 120-inch diameter storm drain pipe in Butterfield Stage Road between DePortolo Road and Temecula Creek. This project is funded entirely with County Assessment District funds and Riverside County Flood Control District contribution. The Habitat for Humanity Old Town units will be included in the presentation on affordable housing projects by Luke Watson in just a few minutes. The Harveston Park Community Building Renovation and Expansion Project, as Erica mentioned earlier, provides for expanded services at Harveston Community Park and is funded by developer contributions from the nearby residential development projects. Infill recreation amenities are included for the addition of park amenities such as the recently completed mini pump tracks at Long Canyon Creek Park and Wolf Creek Park. And hope you have this on your calendar, but we'll be opening the Wolf Creek mini pump track next week. The Rancho California Road median improvements includes the addition of raised landscape medians on Rancho California Road between Margarita and Butterfield Stage Road. The Merck concession upgrade includes the addition and expansion of the existing concession area serving the Merck and the Old Town Community Theater for additional food preparation and service capabilities. The utility undergrounding Main Street project includes undergrounding overhead lines on Old Town Front Street and Main Street between Old Town Front Street and Murrieta Creek, and this project will utilize Southern California Edison Rule 20A funding. Under the category of circulation projects, the I-15 French Valley Parkway Phase 2 project. This is one we've been waiting for a long time to address the congestion on northbound I-15, and this project is planned to begin construction later this year. The project includes the $50 million infra grant from the United States Department of Transportation. Pavement rehabilitation projects are the continuation of efforts to maintain the quality of the city's roadway system, one of our largest assets. We have over $8 million in pavement rehab projects planned this year, including repaving of arterial roadways and slurry seal on residential streets. The Murrieta Creek at Overland Drive project is currently in the final environmental and design phase, with construction anticipated to begin in 2023. The project is funded through the State of California Highway Bridge Program. The Nicholas Road Extension Project includes the extension of Nicholas Road from Calle Girasol to Butterfield Stage Road, along with the addition of a Class 1 off-street bike trail adjacent to Nicholas Road. This project is funded and will be administered by the Somers Bend Development Team. The Diaz Road Expansion Project includes the widening and improvement of Diaz Road between Rancho California Road and Winchester Road, followed by the final phase between Winchester and the northern city boundary. Diaz Road will be the northern extension of the western bypass. The I-15 congestion relief is the addition of the auxiliary lane, which is being led by the city between northbound I-15 from Temecula Parkway to Rancho California Road. And this project will be starting later this year, followed by a larger project led by Caltrans to construct auxiliary lanes between each of the other interchanges in Temecula, both in the northbound and southbound direction. And the Caltrans project is estimated to cost over $50 million and begin in 2024. The Inez Road Phase 2A project includes the widening of Inez Road to its full width between Rancho Vista and Santiago Road. This project is being planned along with the Inez Road Phase 1 project, which is widening between Tierra Vista and Rancho Vista and that is being done in conjunction with the developer of the Rancho Highlands project. We're also planning to construct an interim improvement of Inez Road between Rancho Vista and Santiago to add a second northbound lane this summer. The full construction of that will take place next year, but we'll be doing a interim project this summer to add that second northbound lane to address that congestion on Inez Road. Under the category of infrastructure projects, the Margarita Recreation Center is the new intergenerational recreation center, which also includes a new pool complex. This project is currently under construction and anticipated to be complete in early 2023. The CRC renovation and expansion, phase 1 of this project, will include mostly maintenance-type items and will be starting construction later this year, followed by later phases which will include the expansion of the CRC facility. City facilities rehabilitation includes items for repair and replacement of existing city facilities based on the recently completed citywide facilities assessment study and implementation of our Lucity Asset Management Program. Sidewalk Citywide is a project which includes annual replacement of damaged sidewalks and access ramps throughout the city, as well as new sidewalks and missing gaps from the citywide sidewalk inventory. The comprehensive general plan update is currently underway, and you heard about that earlier from the city manager. Fire Station 84 and 73 interior improvements and additions. Plans for Fire Station 84 are complete, which include a new fitness room, storage room, and kitchen improvements, and this project will be moving forward later this year. And the Fire Station 73 improvements will take place in 2023. The Mary Phillips Senior Center renovation project will be starting construction later this year to include exterior and interior renovations and modernization. We're also installing a new emergency generator at the Mary Phillips Senior Center using funding from a Cal OES grant. Under the category of parks and recreation projects, the flood control channel reconstruction and repairs includes a recently completed project at Friendship Park to prevent future erosion in the Temecula Creek Channel. The next phase will be looking at the channel at the rear of the Mike Nagar Park. The Murrieta Creek Sports Park, funding for this project is included in the budget to begin planning for a new multi-use sports park in the Murrieta Creek Detention Basin property owned by the Riverside County Flood Control District and part of the overall Murrieta Creek improvements. We expect this project will be the cornerstone for future development in the Uptown Temecula District. Playground and equipment and enhancement is the continuation of our annual program to replace playgrounds with themed new playgrounds, and this year we will be including that at Long Canyon Creek Park and Red Hawk Park. The parks improvements is the continuation of our general park facilities replacement. Pickleball courts are included in the budget for this year. That project is to construct a 12-court pickleball complex. And city staff is currently meeting with stakeholders to receive input on conceptual plans and anticipates completion of this project by the summer of 2023. The Ronald Reagan Sports Park hockey rink, the roller hockey rink at the park will be upgraded with a cover and new rink surfacing. Staff will be meeting with representatives of user groups over the next few months and anticipates construction in early 2023. The Ronald Reagan Sports Park Skate Park, the existing skate park, will be reconstructed with a new modern skate park facility. And staff will be meeting with project stakeholders over the next few months to receive input on design concepts and plans for construction in mid-2023. I'll now turn the presentation over to Deputy City Manager Luke Watson, who will discuss the city's affordable housing projects.
Thank you, Pat. Good morning, Mayor and Council. The City of Temecula serves as the successor agency to the Temecula Redevelopment Agency, otherwise known as SARTA, and is responsible for the investment of $12.8 million in bond proceeds of the former RDA. The City Council has approved funding agreements for 2 developments to provide an additional 137 affordable units. Those include the Las Haciendas project located in Uptown Temecula Specific Plan Area, which will provide 77 multifamily affordable units. The project is currently under construction, and the city is providing progress payments to the developer utilizing remaining housing bond proceeds. Vine Creek, the Vine Creek development is located at the corner of Pujol and Main Street and will provide 60 affordable units, 14 of which will be set aside for residents with special needs. The developer is currently seeking tax credit financing in order to be in construction. In addition, the CIP includes a new project partnering with Habitat for Humanity on a third Habitat-led affordable development that will include 6 for-sale townhomes available to low-income families and individuals. This project will give the city a relatively rare opportunity to add another affordable for-sale homeownership opportunity to the city's affordable housing inventory. While there are limited funding options available to cities for the construction of affordable and attainable housing, the city will continue to pursue every funding opportunity possible. Currently, the city is seeking corporate, nonprofit, and affordable housing development partners to come up with innovative ways to address the housing affordability needs of current and future residents. A number of conversations with potential development partners and community stakeholders are ongoing, and the City Council will have an opportunity to weigh in on this issue directly at the city-owned vacant lands visioning workshop scheduled for August of this year. The city's 20-plus year effort to provide attainable housing options for all segments of the community has had past success with the funding and construction of 756 affordable and attainable units. And with the addition of the Las Haciendas, Vine Creek, and Habitat for Humanity developments, the city will soon be able to offer an additional 143 affordable and attainable units to the community. At this time, I'll turn it back over to Director of Finance Jennifer Hennessy to summarize the recommended changes to the budget policies.
As discussed in the February council review of budget policies, several adjustments to the policies have been incorporated into the proposed budget. Signing authority for the city manager to approve contracts, agreements, and purchases is recommended to increase from $60,000 to $100,000. Likewise, his authority to settle insurance claims is also recommended to increase to $100,000. The mayor had requested we memorialize the desired staffing levels for public safety personnel, which is now reflected in both the Measure S and the staffing policy sections. Staff is requesting 2 additional changes, including the update to the asset management and replacement policy to include all replacement funds and reflect our current practices. And finally, it's recommended to remove the current investment policy from the budget and replace it with an updated standalone investment policy. State requirements for the council to annually approve the investment policy have changed and are only required now if changes are requested. As such, a separate updated investment policy will be on the agenda for council consideration at their June 14th, 2022 meeting. I'll turn it back over to Aaron Adams to conclude today's presentation.
Thank you, Jen. As Luke previously mentioned, we will be scheduling a workshop in August to discuss the city's vacant land parcels. And during this public meeting, the City Council will receive a comprehensive presentation identifying all of our vacant city-owned properties. The council will also hear about state legislation impacting the city's sale and use of real property, and will have a facilitated visioning conversation regarding the future use of city-owned vacant sites. The city has a responsibility to maintain a high standards of security for all electronic information under its control. Data that is stored on or accessed by city systems must be secured against intentional or unintentional loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability. As such, the Information Technology Department and Support Services has adopted a heightened posture when it comes to cybersecurity and protecting our city systems. Our continued investment into staff, our processes, and technology all create an effective defense from cyber attacks. The general fund's only debt obligations are on the Civic Center and the MRC facility. The combined outstanding balance is $16.7 million. The loans cannot be paid off prior to 2026 for the Civic Center and 2028 for the MRC. Staff is evaluating the feasibility of setting aside funds in order to pay off these loans and free up general fund operating budget earlier than expected. Staff is also reviewing options to address the city's outstanding pension liabilities with CalPERS. In 2018, the city established an irrevocable pension trust, and with the guidance of the city's actuary, Bartell Associates, staff will soon bring forward a recommended strategy to utilize the funds that are being held in this trust account to reduce the CalPERS unfunded liability even further. As you've heard throughout this presentation, the city remains blessed with an excellent workforce and is financially stable over the ensuing 5-year period, with reserves fully intact, structurally balanced with revenues exceeding expenditure projections, and a robust capital improvement program that is 74% funded and going to keep Pat Thomas busy for a very long time. While our local economy is strong and new businesses continue to open in Temecula, we are keeping a watchful eye on the various economic indicators that help predict future sales tax revenue. While we've built an economic contraction into our 5-year planning, city staff will monitor revenues and will bring council an update if adjustments are needed down the road. I'd like to give a special thanks to the entire executive staff, department budget analysts, and our finance budget team, including Director Jennifer Hennessy, Fiscal Services Manager Tricia Hawk, Senior Accounting Technician Catlin Dorset, all of whom are foundational to our ability to build greatness while maintaining excellence in all we do. This concludes our presentation this morning, and we are available for any questions from the City Council, so thank you.
Fantastic. All right, let's go ahead and start with questions. Who wants to go first? Mary Ann.
Well, congratulations again, and this is incredible considering what the past 2.5 years have been like. And we're anticipating up to 4% growth for the next year, and that's amazing. All the reserves are completely funded because we, pay ourselves first, which is what I was always taught to do by my mom. And now we're looking at a way to pay down the Civic Center or pay off the Civic Center. And that's my first question is, Aaron, can you explain why we can't pay it off until 2026? There's a restriction. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think it has more to do with the loan that was structured between the city and the bank in terms of prepayment options. And so for the Civic Center debt, again, it was 2026, which is right around the corner, 4 years. We pay about $1.6 million a year is our mortgage on this building. But 2026 would be the earliest that we could pay down, the entire amount if we choose to. Jennifer and I have been talking, and I know there'll be other strategies that we could discuss, some of which may be setting aside money each year, in a dedicated account. So when you do get to 2026, we make one final check and we are debt-free on this beautiful Civic Center complex and investment. Same goes for the MRC. That is the only other building that we did borrow. And that was, if you recall, was a result of a good business move because we were going to finance the streetlight acquisitions and we ended up paying cash for all of that. And so borrowing for the MRC money was cheaper in that fashion, and so there's a small debt on that intergenerational center. So that one has the earliest we could plunk down prepayment options on that would be 2 years after the Civic Center, which would be 2028.
Okay, and you said paid cash for the streetlights, and that ended up saving us how much money per year in
It
energy
was like a rough
costs?
estimated $600,000 a
Okay,
year.
so we are leveraging our money and leveraging our money and leveraging that money. Pat, here's one for you. Evidently, 12 courts constitutes a pickleball complex.
Yes.
Okay, good answer. And we talked about building sports park, pretty much, or ball fields in the floodplain. And so if you're at the intersection of Jefferson and Winchester, headed north on Jefferson, you pass all the little shopping center on the left side, and you get to some open space when you go over a bridge. And we're talking about that section of open space that's kind of down in the channel, correct?
Yeah, it's owned by Riverside County Flood Control.
Okay, so I know the answer to this, but just for public conception, what happens when we build it in the flood, in the creek bed there, and what happens if it ever rains again? And it would have to rain a lot, and I suppose someday it will. What happens if that floods?
The fields get watered.
Yeah, exactly. So they're planted in such a way that any flooding will wash over the grass or the turf. And as soon as the water subsides, then
Right.
the turf will spring back. And I have seen that in other cities.
Yeah, and that property is what's known as the detention basin for the Murrieta Creek project, and it will only flood in very large storm events. So we don't anticipate it flooding every year. It would only be if there's a very, very large event, the water would back up in the creek and then flood over out onto that property. So it's not something that will happen on a regular basis, but it potentially will happen, and as Aaron mentioned, the fields really are kind of designed to flood and then drain off and still be usable.
Okay, this is the final question. We have been lobbied more or less by our residents for certain projects, and that's exactly what we want to happen. We want to get feedback from them to see what we want. And as you were going along, I happened to check off everything that I could remember residents requesting, and it had to do with added trails, additional pool time or lanes, swimming pool, if, you know, in lieu of a giant pool that they use that would be Olympic quality. We've added sports fields, we've added pickleball, we've renovated all the parks. Well, we're working on renovating all the parks. They're all either finished or they're on schedule to be completely renovated and upgraded. What am I forgetting? Oh, the pump tracks, adding that. And the bicycle, the hockey rink is going, right? And the skating rink is going. I can't think of anything else that people have asked for that we don't have now in the budget.
It's a heavy lift, there's no doubt. But just a couple quick comments on a couple projects you brought up I wanted to clarify. The sports complex proposed for the detention basin, that has been, contemplated since the city incorporated and Murrieta
Right,
incorporated, because it sits right on the border. And we have been aggressively looking at state funding to help offset that, because it's shown not completely funded in the CIP. And we've also had some, we got our asks into our federal government.
That was
folks too.
asks. Asks into federal government.
Yes, and asks.
Yes.
And we're going to remain hopeful that we might be able to leverage some federal dollars or state dollars towards that sports complex. The other thing you mentioned, pickleball complex. So we might as well put it out there. We've been doing the outreach on pickleball, hugely popular. Seemingly you can't build these courts fast enough today to keep up with the activists. As part of our outreach down on the south end of town, we were met with some strong resistance to such a development there in the Wolf Creek area. So we certainly aren't going to not take that lightly, and we will regroup. I believe we'll be meeting with the Park and Rec Subcommittee. It wasn't going to be built this calendar year, but we'll continue with design plans. I do think it's warranted in our city, but certainly want to place it in the right location where it's welcomed by the residents too. So that just came to light in the last, 72 hours or so.
Surprise.
Maybe concern, Pat can speak to it more. I know that he and Alvin were at the community meeting too.
Yeah, we met with the Wolf Creek Homeowners Association board representatives, and they expressed several concerns about the location that we had been working on at the Wolf Creek Park. So we're going to be reevaluating, looking at those issues, and potentially looking at some other possible locations as well.
We can canvass the pickleballers and find out where the majority of them live. They might be able to sway the day for that.
I think they're willing to drive wherever the complex ends up. So it's probably the homeowners that we need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Needless to say, pickleball is on there, and
It's
we
on the
are.
map, it's on the plan,
Yeah,
it's
we're all over
funded,
it.
and it's going to be great.
My final, this is a comment, not a question, but I guess I can turn it into a question. Isn't it amazing that we have a $700 million capital improvement budget, which is larger than Anaheim's, and it's larger than Irvine, and those are really, I'm sure it's larger than other major cities as well, but for a city the size of Temecula to be able to do this many things, plus find a way to pay off this, this small debt remains our only debt that's on the Civic Center, which will leave us debt-free, is remarkable. And thank you to the residents for, paying their Measure S and for paying their Measure C park fees, which have never, increased since we established them. It's an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you.
So thank you, great job.
All right, anyone else? Zach?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe just a couple of comments and one brief question. I certainly appreciate all the hard work by staff and from every department. This is quite a story to tell, right? We talk about that, I think, every single year. We talk about that. I'm glad you addressed the debt and the pension obligation. I think that's a great idea. Fully supportive of that. Councilmember Edwards, you mentioned Measure S. Thanks for the residents for passing that. $123 million since 2017. I think I've heard it previous budget workshops. Imagine if that didn't exist, the situation we'd be in, and we're in a much better situation. I did appreciate the addition of staff, especially code enforcement. We can definitely start being more proactive, and really looking forward to that. And I know, adding folks back from the Height has been on the list, and we've sort of methodically gone through that, so I appreciate that. I will advocate for, especially as we move through the general plan update and complete a complete streets plan, to add an active transportation coordinator. I think that's something that will certainly make a difference down the road long term. One thing I saw on the commission slide was training. They desired training. I think that's a great idea, to continue lifelong learning, and council could probably use that on occasion as well, where we could have some specific training. So I think that's a great idea. Along the lines of this being a good story to tell, outside of the folks that are here, which, by the way, we're going to maybe print off 30,000 copies of this PowerPoint, and we can all deliver them door to door, because it is such a good story to tell. Is there a way that, well, I know there's a way, can we communicate this maybe it's through the city manager's office, or maybe it's through, Instagram or, social media, communicating this? Because a lot of the questions, comments, concerns that we get throughout the year are constantly being addressed. And I think it's a good way for us to address, what's going on with affordable housing, what's going on with, some of our park amenities, and the improvements that we are making. These meetings typically go overlooked. There's a handful of folks here, and we'll get some views online. And I think there's a way that we can communicate some of this stuff, lead up to the actual adoption of the budget. Well, yeah, almost. Like if you go through that PowerPoint that we just went through, there's a really good amount of information, and again, that good story. And I mean, I could go back through some of the conversations I've had with the community, and these things are answered, and it's strategic, and it's meaningful over the course of 5 years, right? And so I think that's just important for us to play offense on this story. So if there's a way that we can, like I said, maybe work with our social media team, or whether it's through the city manager's message or whatnot, there's a lot of good stuff here that I think the community finds out about, and we can maybe be more deliberate in the way that we present it, because again, we were well prepared for this, so we're not going to have a ton of questions. The documents in advance, and we do one-on-ones prior to this, and this is sort of the culmination of that. But again, there's a lot of good stuff here, and I think the community, if they were to read this, if they were to watch this, they would be extremely pleased. Not that they're not, because maybe that's the flip side of this, right? As we always talk about, there's not folks here because they're generally, 95% happy with everything that we're doing. So those are just some of my thoughts. But I appreciate all the work that went into this. Fantastic. You make my job extremely easy up here with this presentation, and with your diligence and your forward thinking. So I just really appreciate you all. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Alexander?
I will keep it quick, because again, just like Council Member Zach Schwenk had just stated, that we got all of our questions answered in a good brief earlier this week. So thank you for that, by the way, Jennifer. Thank you again to the executive staff. You guys I'll just call it, you do a kick butt job, like all the time. There's a lot that goes into it, and everybody that works with you guys, as far as just staff overall, does wonderful. So thank you for making our jobs easier as well. The only thing I just want to be in agreement with is I had it in my notes, and Councilmember Edwards had stated it, and I'm definitely in agreement with the Civic Center and the MRC to be paid off quicker, as well as quick as possible. You know, I don't know what that looks like. I know, Aaron, we've had a couple discussions about that, and just being that fiscally conservative city that we are, just to ensure that we pay that off so we can get things like the pool, and we can get things like the theater that we're wanting to get, and just be debt-free, because I don't want to be, I know nobody likes to have debt, so I just love the fact that we're going to be able to pay that off. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like, so we can just move forward, and especially like Councilmember Edwards has stated, we're always there to be able to be at the request of the residents of what they're wanting, and I think this is just going to be a great way to be able to do that. So thank you guys for your time and for the presentation today.
All right. So I have a list of about 14 items here that, I'm just kidding. Remember when I did that one year? Yeah, that was horrible. Yeah.
I think I was ready to slap you at that point.
Do you want your slideshow queued up?
Right, left some scars. No, so this was a great presentation this morning. I think the not unlike what we talked about a little while ago at the State of the City. You know, it's easy to tell this story because the news is so good and we've come such a long way. I think the one thing that I was thinking of as I was looking over the documents, and then I went backwards and looked back and said, question, where were we 10 years ago? So I looked at the budgets from 2012, and it's interesting because the preface to 2012 wasn't unlike, other prefaces today saying, well, we've just emerged from a very difficult time and a, downturn in the economy and so forth. And so, a decade later, we've had some amazing successes, but also some pretty monumental challenges. So that said, it was interesting because in that report 10 years ago, there was a value that was placed on the city's net assets. And really it was just sort of this calculation of, all the infrastructure, all of the things that we have, along with the debt that we're carrying and others, and kind of place it into perspective. And the thing that jumped out at me was our net assets 10 years ago is basically almost the identical budget to our capital improvement plan today, right? 700 some odd $1 million being invested. So, we're basically investing in capital what our entire city's net assets were a decade ago. Right, and that is just a remarkable, accomplishment when you think about it. But benchmarking it, I think, going forward. So as we're having this conversation about, community centers and pools and other infrastructure, parks, and the last, what we're 85-90% built out at this point, right? So, and we're going through this exercise to look at those remaining city properties that we do have control over and start making some decisions of what that looks like. And for me, it's not just an investment in the community, but it's an investment in our infrastructure, and it's an investment in our economic development moving forward too, right? So then what I was wondering is, would we be able to sort of put together that net assets evaluation again, right? And so it's all of the the physical assets, the vehicles, the equipment, all of those kind of things, but also the roadways and landscape. It was interesting because you actually referred to roadways as a city asset. It is. It's a multi-million-dollar investment in something that the city owns, right? Our parks, our facilities, our streetlights, all of the other infrastructure that goes around this. And I know this is kind of a big ask, but, even, sorry, Jennifer, but there's only one item this year. So rather than 14, I just put one really big one together. But for benchmarking purposes, I think it would be interesting to see how does that change over time. And maybe this isn't something we need to do every budget year. Maybe this is an every 5 to 10 year thing. But from a benchmarking perspective, how do we change over time? And then you know, I'm thinking of it from the idea of a perspective of that investment. So if we're trying to do a cost-benefit analysis, right, what does this asset, if we're going to build a park or a theater or whatever that happens to be, you know, we need to be real cognizant, I think, of not just what the physical asset costs, but the long-term obligation of operation and maintenance, you know, and then the other, you know, flip side of that is if you do invest in that, can we, you know, work with Kaiser Marston or somebody else to say, okay, so what is the potential for that investment to bring into our city? Because we certainly want, as we're doing these things, there's plenty of stuff that the city invests in that isn't budget neutral. Right? I mean, it's a good investment for our community because it's important, but we don't make, you know, we don't increase our revenue because of it. And those are decisions that are important to our community. But the other decisions, you know, what we don't want to do over the next, you know, 10 years is invest in a lot of assets that actually make us budget negative either, right? So having that sort of perspective, especially on the big dollar asks, I think is going to be real important. And then being able to identify, look, if we build this, you know, infrastructure, whatever that piece is, are we responsible for the operations and maintenance and the funding and the staff and everything else? Or are we doing this on behalf of, right? And then the question is, and not to diminish the importance of, say, a large pool, but, you know, if we're building a multi-million-dollar asset where we have 50 families in the city of Temecula who benefit from it, you know, I'm not saying that's the right number, but just, you know, just as an example, if we build a major asset that we hear from, and it's like 50 families, you know, I mean, we have to put that into perspective, right? So I think all of that is kind of an important piece. And then then we can look at the obligations that we have and see, is there a good public-private partnership or something that can occur to help offset all of that? So that's really the only thing, you know, I was thinking is that just as we start to contemplate the last bits of property and investment in Temecula in these major programs, what would that look like? And then the other thing, you know, mentioned with the pickleball courts, you know, it blew up a little bit, and understandably, I get it. And I think part of it, too, is we have these neighborhood parks. We have these neighborhood assets that are really, you know, for the kids and the families and things to go. But, you know, building a pickleball complex becomes a regional asset because we know we're bringing in people from outside the city, you know, much like our library does. I mean, it's one of the, you know, if not the most heavily utilized library in the county. And we recognize that and we value that. That's an important thing to have in our community. But again, we're trying to make that balance of, you know, are we investing in a regional asset? And if we are, what does that do from a tax revenue and other perspective? But then the balance, of course, is, so what's the impact on our local neighborhoods and communities? And does that decision, you know, balance out at all? Because, you know, if you've got 50 neighbors who are, you know, put off by an asset that becomes, you know, a traffic issue or a noise issue or a parking issue or whatever it is it really wise for us as a community to make those decisions? And so as we start to contemplate some of this stuff moving forward, and the good news is we have plenty of time to figure all this stuff out, but, you know, those last, you know, 10 to 15% of properties in the city that we're playing with, I think we have to be very, very prescriptive and very careful with how we view them. So that was really the only other issue. And the last piece is just the investment in public safety. Not just the investment, but the reinvestment, right? So we're not looking at status quo. You know, we're the 16th safest city now, and up from number 20. It's not a mistake, and it's because we invest so heavily. You know, I think we've done an outstanding job doing that. But I also appreciate in the conversation today the understanding that public safety isn't just about, you know, police and fire, right? There's a lot of other things that go into that to make the community safe and make the job of police and fire easier and safer. So, you know, anyway, just kudos to all the staff for all the hard work and pulling this budget together, being very perspective on where we are, and the sensitivity analyses that are done too. I think those are very important for us to be able to understand. You know, and, you know, I hate to say this, but I remember in 2019 sitting down with you, Ms. Hennessy, and saying, you know, can you model the worst case scenario of what could happen with our budgets and economies so we know that as a city we're prepared for it? And little did we know, you know, those exercises would come into play, you know, several months later. I think that is absolutely an important piece of what this city does to stay resilient, and it shows. So, it's a great exercise to go through. It's a little scary, of course, but incredibly valuable.
Mayor Ron, I want to agree with you about calculating future investments in our net worth, and that's exactly the way the city entered the question of whether or not, do we need Measure S? And Measure S was considered that way. They looked out to the future, and they included all maintenance and, all of those things that were going to come along. And I think that behooves us every time. And had the residents not seen the value in past Measure S, we would be in a world of hurt right now. And since we've done that, I think virtually every city around us has done a similar ballot measure to cover the escalating costs. And we see how inflation is just running rampant right now. And we're still doing great. So you're absolutely correct about, calculating, I always call it our net worth. We need to know that figure because it does impact a lot of things, including our bond rating and many other things, so.
Yeah, well, and I think too, real quick, is that if we are going to invest in a new asset, I think it's important to kind of, again, benchmark it against what we currently have. Like, a $50 million investment in this project is, X percentage of our overall, assets in the city, because then it kind of puts it into perspective of either the magnitude of what we're doing, or in some cases, the minor contribution, but the maximum gain, right? And it just allows us to have those conversations a little bit more freely. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I completely appreciate what you just said and what everyone said here. As a fiscal conservative, I too would love to have the credit card paid off before we're seriously contemplating big ticket capital projects. I just think that's just the way, that's just a good business move. And what you guys are describing is sort of how we've managed things for 30 years. Mr. Mayor, Jen tells me the net asset model is doable. So, we can go back to the drawing board and sort of bring that back to the full council and sort of walk everyone through sort of what that looks like in current numbers. And I think it does tie back to what we've been doing for several years here when we said it's time to start paying ourselves and set up these asset management sub-accounts and for when the roof fails and when this bridge goes out and stuff. So we've been doing a good job, and this is what we call our asset management maintenance program. And it falls under Pat Thomas's shop to sort of oversee that. But every year, those deposits are going in there, and sometimes they're going out to replace the fleet that we plan to replace or the roof that needed to be replaced as we age as a city. So that's just good as we age out as a community. The final thing I wanted to say, and it's one of my favorite things that I don't want to get lost in this conversation, is there was a chart that Pat showed you. When you talk about just this ridiculously aggressive CIP program, is how much of that is being leveraged with outside money. And I don't know if you caught it, but I believe it's about 74% isn't Temecula taxpayer money. These are dollars that Pat and his team, others have gone after to get, and then we leverage that, and then that's how you build this massive CIP. And that's just really good work. It requires time, energy, talent, and grant writing, and pursuing and hunting down and shaking the bushes at state level, federal level, county level. So we're continuing to be aggressive on that front, which is why we have this big CIP.
One more thing, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
We took a beating early on in the year or at the end of last year from people saying, how did you spend the $14 million you were getting from the federal government for COVID? Well, we didn't have the $14 million at the time that they were asking us how we spent the money. But if you go through the budget here, and it was mentioned as we went through each line item, that money went 100% back to the community, and the breakdown of it is in the budget. So you can see absolutely 100% of that went directly back to the community in the form of nonprofits and services and things like that.
Yeah, it's a 2-year investment, outward facing, for sure.
and you reminded me of one thing that I was thinking of and forgot about. Grant writing. It's been incredibly important for the city. One thing I'd like for the city manager's office to contemplate maybe is the idea of hiring a full-time grant writer for the city to be able to help out all departments. I was happy to participate in a number of grants that we've done over the years, and especially our most recent one with CAL FIRE. That just happens to be my background, and I don't mind lending a hand for that. That's fun. But I realize that a lot of these specialize, especially in public works and a lot of what Luke's shop does and community services. It's a very specialized process. And then not only that, but to then taking it to that next level of working with our legislative office and being able to advocate for those funds too and have that full wraparound. If we're going to continue this behavior of writing for hundreds of millions of dollars in grants, I think that's the cost benefit on that one's pretty simple, right? So especially having that additional resource so that all the departments, I know how truly difficult some of these are to put together. And then not just that, but the follow-up of, both successes and rejections, because those rejections, they're often, laced with, well, this is how you, do it the next time, and this is how you improve. So whatever we could do to kind of look toward those positions and really creating a structure around that as a city would probably be in our best interest.
Yeah, we've had some good debate at the executive staff level about the pros and cons of singular professional grant writer, what it does, operations. One person doesn't necessarily know all the disciplines, and then teams of grant writers versus keeping it in-house. So we've batted this around and it's moved around, but your point is well taken. We'll keep it on our front burner because it is a lot of work and to be successful. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, suggestions?
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
Anything
We'll
else?
be repackaging. We'll be back in front of the city council in 3 to 4 weeks for a similar presentation and final adoption. And we're got our marching orders for another fiscal year. So thank you for your support.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Anything else from anybody for the good of the order? No? Then we'll go ahead and close this meeting.
I don't
do
know
we
if
have
there's any
anything
public
else?
comment.
Is there any public comment? Nothing. All right. Well then, good job, and we'll see you all later.